So hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Something a bit different today. We're going to take a deep dive into the rampant IP filings of SRAM LLC over the last 3 to 4 years. Now, no surprise really that during the COVID years the IP filings really did ramp up. Not many factories were open in China and Taiwan, not a lot of racing was happening, and it was a really good time to do some kind of in-house R&D. Now it's just worth noting, if you're not au fait with IP or engineering design, just because you have a patent or a patent or something, or just because you read something in a piece of IP, it doesn't mean that actually works. It doesn't mean it has any commercial value. It's literally just a concept or a principle that you can relate to an IP lawyer who will draft the patent. It's not peer reviewed and it's not a scholarly article. It's just a concept or an idea that you might have. But it can have commercial value if it's put into practice, and that's the origin of IP and IP protection. Now, if it's a smaller company, a small to medium business in engineering, often if a company finds something in use that has real commercial value and they want to protect it, they will. On the other hand, some very big companies do kind of blanket bombing IP protection of everything, and you'll see patents going back 10, 15 years that never see the light of day, and it just seems like the more patents the better. Anyway, we're going to take a look at some of the SRAM ones. It's a bit of a mixture of both. So like I said, you don't actually have to have anything lab tested, anything verified. There doesn't have to be any third-party validation on any of your principles. Now, in the last patent that I was an inventor on, my IP lawyer, she actually had a chemical engineering background, and so she couldn't even really validate the mechanical principles that I was trying to portray in that patent. Now, take nothing away, she was a super clever person, but it's not as if I had to go to a third-party lab and validate the idea. You just had to provide some drawings and a very detailed description of how it works. On that note, if you are a young engineer at an engineering company and you think you've stumbled upon something of real value, don't get the IP at that company. Leave the company if you think you've really got a gold mine there. Get the patent off your own back, because as an inventor, it'll be in your contract. The company, your employer, will own the IP and you'll own nothing. Anyway, moving on to some of the SRAM patents then. The first one that caught my eye was quite interesting because this was actually filed back in 2017, I think, but it's only just been granted at the back end of last year. What we have here is a damper integrated into a hub to minimise disc brake noise and squeal. Now, you might have seen on some of my previous wheel videos that I've gone on about resonance, and quite often when you get disc brake squeal, even in the dry, it's not really the rotor or the pads itself, it's something in the sort of wheel, fork and frame system that's being excited and going into resonance. And I think in my last wind space video I proved that the spokes were going into resonance, or some part of the wheel assembly was going into resonance, because I did some spectrum analysis. Anyway, I'll leave something to do with that on the screen here. But now SRAM are obviously thinking the same thing. How can we minimise the excitation to the spokes from the disc brake? And it all comes, the original excitation is the stick slip of the pads on the disc. Now that can happen in the wet, can happen in the dry. But what they've done is put a kind of compliant damper between where the disc mounts on the hub and the rest of the hub, which is obviously fixedly connected or rigidly connected to the spokes and the rest of the wheel assembly. Now, we've still not seen this in production because I think practically there's a few issues with this. If you have a compliant member separating the disc from the rest of the hub, you need to really make sure that its axial position along the hub is going to stay exactly constant, because otherwise you'll get disc rub and you'll get a sort of wandering disc. And you need to minimise the ingress of dirt, grit, otherwise that damper's going to wear out. And yeah, it's quite a complex thing to do in mass production. You don't really see that on automotive or motorbikes, but it's a nice idea and just goes to show that I'm not mad. Wheels do vibrate, spokes do go into resonance. I mean, anywhere between 20 and 20,000 hertz really, but I think we picked up about 750 hertz in my spectrum analysis of the wind space. But anyway, now this next one is super juicy. You know what I think about hookless rims and how the industry's been pushing them? Well, this is quite an interesting filing because this was filed a couple of years ago, but literally only just granted 3 or 4 days ago at the end of May. SRAM have kind of admitted that there is a problem with hookless rims in some scenarios where the tyre pressure exceeds a certain limit or the riding conditions are not suitable for hookless. And they have proposed a method of gluing on or bonding on hooks onto hookless rims. Furthermore, I got a lot of hate once on a GCN video where I commented that hookless rims were all to do with saving production costs because you didn't have to extract quite a complicated mandrel in the carbon mould. Wow, that seemed really far-fetched, didn't it? Well, I've always just said it's a cost reduction exercise, so what do I think that? Well, a couple of factories just told me. It's a lot easier, the mould's a lot simpler, there's less steel tooling involved, they don't have to extract that part of the steel tool that forms the hook. But it seems like SRAM have also admit that in their text, in the patent description. It says that hookless rims offer a significant cost saving in manufacturing. However, they're now trying to stick hooks back on with adhesive. I'm not kidding, this whole patent is about sticking hooks back onto hookless rims, because it says that in certain applications of tyre pressure and riding conditions, hookless rims aren't suitable. So it seems like we've gone full circle. The media never really gave us a truthful appraisal of a hookless rim. Now to file a patent about sticking hooks back on with glue. It's still cheaper to stick them on with glue than make them in the mould. So that's why they're doing it. Absolutely crazy. Now, I've not got anything really against hookless rims. I've got them on a couple of mountain bike wheels that I own. But I don't really think there's a significant advantage, ever has been. Yes, it might be cheaper to make them, but I wouldn't use them on a road bike. We still don't have enough tyre choice, and the tyre pressure is limited to 73, which on a narrow tyre is not offering me enough hoop stress to really reduce rolling resistance on a smooth road. Yeah, it might be okay on a crap road, but if you're doing a road bike TT on a smooth road and you're riding a 25 or a 28, you're my weight, 73 PSI ain't gonna cut it. 73 PSI on a 30 or 32 is a bit more like it, because you've got a lot more hoop stress in the carcass and the CRI will come down. But so there we go, SRAM LLC protecting their IP for gluing hooks back onto the rims they took them off of to save a bit of money. Number 3. Suspension fork for gravel/road. Now I quite like this one, to be honest, quite like this one. I think we might see this one coming up soon, although it is a bit weird because SRAM own RockShox and they actually make a telescopic gravel fork, the RockShox Judy, right? I think it's called the Judy. You might think, hang on, this linkage fork looks like a Lauf with the leaf springs. Well, they're claiming that the Lauf fork, and I kind of agree, doesn't really rigidly connect the steering or the contact patch of the tyres to the steering axis. The only members connecting the whole thing are the leaf springs, and normally in a suspension part you'd have your leaf spring as more of a passive component. Well, actually no, you wouldn't. In a leaf spring on a car, it does support the steering, but anyway, it doesn't give you a very sort of rigid steering assembly. So what SRAM are doing, or RockShox are doing, is using this linkage, kind of fixed plate linkage. And if you've got very, very, very light road buzz that the tyre doesn't damp, the telescopic fork can sometimes not really deal with that. You would never notice it on a downhill bike or something like that, but on a limited travel kind of telescopic XC fork, where your spring rate has to be quite high because there's not much travel, they are quite firm. Now this is a really interesting one, this one. I guess this is to do with Zip, but Zip are trying to, and again, this was only just granted a couple of days ago in May. Zip are trying to protect the kind of butterfly weave that you see on carbon wheels. So this should get a lot of the Chinese wheel manufacturers pretty worried, because Zip are claiming it's theirs. So laying carbon up in a fan shape, fanning out from the spoke hole, SRAM are claiming that is their technology. How are they going to enforce it? Well, you could lay that up and just put some more UD fabric on top to cover up that butterfly weave. But Windspace Hypers and other rims coming out of Jarmen, some of the Fast Sports Revo ones, I don't know, they might have to change it, because SRAM have now claimed that's theirs, and it has been granted worldwide, I think. So the point is, by laying these ribbons of UD up in a fan orientation, distributes the spoke loads better, distributes the impact loads onto the rim better, but it's kind of already been done. I think they're going to be finding that really hard to prove that that was their idea first. Well, they have done, but it is going to get a lot of the Chinese makers a little bit worried, or it should do, I think, because they need to take that seriously. Diving deeper into that patent, it is very, very vague, and it basically says that other shapes and orientations, not just the fan shape or the butterfly weave, can be used, other materials can be used, carbon fibre with an amide resin, which is what the Chris King thing is, can also be used in this orientation. It's just so general. They've basically, if you were being really facetious, you would say they've patented laying up carbon fibre rims with different orientations of fibres. It's really quite vague. And it's just the SRAM IP machine marching on. It's quite worrying, to be honest. But only just granted a few days ago is SRAM's basically own version of an IceTech rotor. Now, you know that IceTech are not my favourite, and the way SRAM are getting around this and claiming it's their own is they are integrating the spider with the aluminium core. So the aluminium core goes all the way from the kind of brake track area down to the hub, instead of having a separate spider that's then riveted onto the aluminium core and the steel braking surfaces like IceTech have. And then it looks like from the pattern description and the pictures that the stainless steel braking surface actually goes all the way around the aluminium core and is not just stuck on either side. It actually encompasses, so the right outer circumference is covered by the stainless steel and it sort of overlaps and comes back around. That's quite complex to manufacture, and I'm not sure we'll see that one, but if you also pick up on SRAM disc brake patterns, they've got a load of kind of design patterns with basically just ornamental or artistic designs of their rotors, which is kind of normal. It's a bit like a copyright type thing for something physical instead of being a logo. But yeah, it seems like they're challenging Shimano on the whole aluminium core IceTech kind of technology, which is interesting. I mean, I've never had a problem with solid steel rotors. So I hope you enjoyed that look into the SRAM IP filings of the last year. Like I said, there are tens of more to get stuck into. A lot of them are control engineering and a bit boring, and sort of how to control e-bikes and pair sensors and stuff. So I've just gone over some of the main mechanical ones which I thought were quite interesting, particularly that butterfly weave one and the glued on hooks back onto hookless rims. I mean, that's criminal. And don't forget, just liking and subscribing is enough to say thanks for this mildly boring engineering content. Cheers, and I'll see you in the next one.